Well, it's a privilege here to sit here with Gordon Johnson and talk a little bit about the many years you spent at Walla Walla University. And do you recall when the first time you laid eyes on the College Place campus of Walla Walla University?
I had people that we knew up here, and so when I was a teenager or something, I remember coming to campus.
Did you think at that point, maybe someday I'll go to school here?
Never crossed my
Never
mind.
crossed your mind.
No.
And then you ended up going to school here.
Yeah.
And then after you graduated here, what did you do next?
Well, I went right off to graduate school and went to California, a little out of my comfort zone. It was fun, and I look back on it, it was a good experience.
At that point, did you see yourself eventually teaching somewhere, or was that kind of a surprise when it happened?
More of a surprise. Pretty much everybody that was finishing graduate school was going off and working in industry. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed like that was the way to go.
So there was a good possibility you might have headed in that direction, somewhere in industry perhaps.
Yeah.
And then you ended up here. How did that happen?
After I finished graduate school, I had a couple of years that I was at a postdoc back at Purdue University. And the money for the postdoc was somewhat limited. Interestingly enough, although I was in electrical engineering, I was teaching labs over in the physics department, which it turns out I really enjoyed. I began to think more about teaching, and so I actually sent out some applications. Anyway, the short story is that Orrin McNeil called me out of the blue from here at Walla Walla, and they had a vacancy in physics. Orrin had got my name actually through a family friend. Anyway, so he called me on Sunday and said, well, we have this opening, are you interested? And I said, yeah, I am. The rest is kind of history.
So here you end up back at your alma mater a number of years later, teaching physics. What was that like, coming from a big graduate school and then coming here to teach?
So it's a very different place, and it is small, and in that sense, it wasn't quite as scary, but people knew who you were, and you got to know some of your fellow students pretty well, and I appreciated that. I don't know what would have happened if I'd been at a really big place. You kind of get lost.
What are some of the memories you have of the campus in the few years you came back? As I recall, Columbia Auditorium was basically pretty much where we're sitting now.
Yes.
But then something happened to it. Can you tell me about that?
Only as an observer. We were living about a mile north of here during those years, and I think we heard the sirens. The interesting thing about that fire, the front facade of Columbia Auditorium was still standing, and if you look closely, you could see where it had been singed, scorch marks, yeah. And it wasn't until I turned to come down to Kretschmar, and I looked, the roof, everything is gone.
And smoldering embers.
Smoldering, yeah. That's how I found out about Columbia Auditorium.
You certainly have an interest in hiking, backpacking, and being outside. How did that translate into your environment as working on this college campus?
Well, I don't know whether I found a way or it found me, but people that I knew that I had that kind of interest, that I was invited to assist first with the backpacking class that's offered here on campus. And then it turns out when that person left,
you just kept going.
Yeah, I kept on with it. It has to be one of the most interesting things that I've done, I think, on campus. You just get to know students in a different way. Some of those students are ones that you have the closest connection with.
What do you think is a reason to do stuff like that when you're in the midst of a busy college life?
Well, I know why I did it.
Yeah, why
and
did
it,
you do that?
And it gave me an excuse to just ditch class for a couple of days and think about other things. You didn't have to worry about anything.
I bet the students felt that way too.
Well, I
Late
think
in the
so.
school year.
Now, there was an interesting time, and that was one of the students had a calculus exam on Friday, and so he was going to miss it and had made some arrangement to pick it up. I talked with Dr. Thompson, and I got an exam, and I had it in an envelope. And on Friday morning, as he got out of his tent, the student, I said, well, you were going to miss, but here's your exam.
Nice guy.
And he looked at it for at least 30 seconds or so. I mean, it was really great. And then it all, of course, we laughed.
I bet Tom Thompson would like to have been there to see that one.
I'm sure he would have. There was one student that I carried a rock. He put a rock in my pack. What he didn't know is he carried it out.
Because you found it?
Well, I found it, of course, when I got...
Yeah, stuck in his pack.
And I didn't say much, but when I got time to go to hike out, it ended up in his pack.
And see, that's good. That's good.
So he got quite a kick out of that. He didn't expect that. But.
I wonder, as a career-long teacher and practitioner of science, and spending so many years teaching at a Seventh-day Adventist Christian university, did you find challenges to your faith? Did you find ways to bring your faith and your scientific learning together? How did that work for you?
I think it gave me an opportunity, to certainly discuss it with colleagues that are sort of like-minded. Being in an environment where that was quite open to that, I mean, we would have some very, frank discussions about things. My conclusion is we're going to be thinking about this
for a long time
until the Lord comes.
And after.
After, but at least then maybe we have somebody to ask the questions to that can give us good answers.
Exactly. You, for years, were involved with Pathfinders. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it seemed like years, and when I count, it's only 5 or 6, but I didn't get involved until my older daughter actually was part of Pathfinders, and then I stayed involved until I think my younger daughter finished Pathfinders. It turns out that the staff and a number of the counselors were students. That was, a nice way to get to know them. Those were good years.
What are some of the challenges you saw Walla Walla College or university go through while you were here?
Probably the biggest deal was because of low enrollment. With careful planning, that's more manageable, but quite a few friends were on the task force, but they were faculty members who were asked to recommend ways of saving money and what do we cut? And
up to 40 positions, as I recall. There was a lot of trauma.
Yes. That was, I think, probably the worst time. I mean, there were some good times because there were some highs in enrollment.
What were some of those?
Well, the enrollment highs when things were really rosy. I think the Canada Technology Center, finishing that was
a
big deal. Mm-hmm. We had some pretty good presidents. Administrations kind of come and go, but it does make a difference when you have good administrators.
Tone.
Yes.
If a friend of yours or a family member chatted with you, knowing that it's been a few years since you taught here, but you're in the community, saying, my son or daughter is thinking of coming to Walla Walla University for their degree, what would you tell that family member?
Well, there's a lot of good people here. How do I know? they were my students. And so that's actually, I can say that with confidence. It continues to impress me, I think, how good people actually are willing to come back and actually teach. That, I think, is something that gives me a lot of joy, to see that happening. I try to remind myself to actually, let them know how much we older people actually appreciate their willingness to come and kind of pick up the torch and carry it.